People were being prayed for. This guy gave a testimony that he was videotaping the thing, and I think he's one of the staff members. In fact, I actually witnessed what happened. He came by me, and he stopped to this girl right in front of me. She was 20-something, 22, 23, 24, like that. A young black lady who came wandering into the tent, and he started talking to her, and he said that she was buying food with her family at these food trucks. In D.C., the thing you do downtown there is you buy food from the food trucks to the restaurants are like too far away and it's too hard to get to. So she was buying food with her family, and she heard the music playing in the tent. And as she expressed it, she said, something compelled me to come into this tent. I don't know, I knew I had to come in here. And so she was sitting there, and as he walked by, he said, hey, what's your name? She asked, yes, what's your name? She said, are you okay? What can I do? They started talking with her, and she found out she needed Jesus. They told her the story. And so he prayed with her. She accepted Christ right there and came into this relationship with Jesus. Then she went back outside, back to the food truck, grabbed her family, and dragged her family back into the tent. See? All that's happening because they're doing this on the national level, because this guy had a vision 5 years ago that he should set up this tent, and he did whatever he could to make this happen. It was really a phenomenal place to be. And I say that as far as aspects of the hope and the joy and the peace that was happening in that tent. I can tell you this right now. As soon as you step out of that tent, we had to fly home. As soon as you step out of the tent, you start walking around, you get into the airports, you get into the planes, you run. Nobody looks at each other. Nobody talks to each other. You can't make eye contact with 9 out of 10 people anymore. Everybody's got these masks on. They're wearing face shields and they're wearing masks. And they're doing, and I'm not criticizing doing all those things. When I was sensing this, there's a lot of fear. It was a total different atmosphere between being in that tent in the presence of Jesus and being outside in the airport where people don't want to be near you. They turn and they move around you. They're afraid of you. Not just a virus, they're afraid of you practically. It's so evident right now. And I wanted to chat with you guys for just a few minutes before we haven't got a lot of time, but I want to talk to you something about faith this morning. This guy that set up this tent, at the end he said that he's got a vision now from, actually went out and purchased a 3,000 person tent. Which is probably like 4 times the size of this one. You got kind of little circus tents, He bought a 3,000 person tent. And he wants to take this tent. Jeremy's an evangelist. Here you go, Jeremy. He bought this 3,000 person tent, and he wants to take it around the country. And he wants to set it up in Dallas and Atlanta and Chicago and Portland. And he wants to set this up in the middle of places and just start doing this 24-hour, 7-day worship place for a while. Do you know how much money that's going to take him to do that? He's already bought the tent. He's got to buy sound systems and stages and trucks to haul it and have people to do this. Man, this guy's got vision. He's got faith. He's got faith that God spoke to him. He's going to do this. So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about faith, because faith is an important aspect to this thing that we call Christianity. It's that title, that name we call it, Christianity. But the heart of it is actually faith. So really, take just a couple minutes to define this. You guys know this author, Mark Twain. Yep. Mark Twain said that faith is believing in something you know ain't true. See, many people think that faith is this thing that's opposed to reason and logic. That either you have logic and reasoning and understand how something works, or you have this faith to believe in something that ain't true. See, they separate the two from one. But I think that faith is actually the opposite of certainty. See, when you have a certainty in something, you know that something's going to happen or not happen. There's no faith involved in that. If you believe it, if you're really super good at putting up a house, really good at construction, and you have, you are certain you can build this house, it doesn't take a lot of faith. If you have $100 in your wallet and you want to go buy a pair of headphones and pay $100 on it, there's not a lot of faith involved in that. I've got $100, I'm going to spend $100. But if you say, I want to do something like this guy, it's going to cost me hundreds of thousands of dollars. I don't know where the money's coming from. I don't know where the people are coming from. That's an aspect of faith. You're doing something that you just don't know what's going to happen. There's an uncertainty there. See, faith, most of us have faith as a noun. You know, like we say, I have faith to believe that if I sit in this chair, the chair is not going to collapse on me. But what I'm doing is I have faith in the chair. See? That makes it a noun. Faith is a verb. Faith is a verb. It's a thing that we do. There's that kind of word, faith. You know, when we have faith that provides a substance to something that we're hoping for. So faith provides the substance for something that we hope for. I would guess, most likely, that most of you guys that are in here, I don't know you guys, but I would say that most of you guys in here, at some point in your life, you've had a dream. You've had something that you wished for. Something that you hoped for. Maybe, I don't know what it is. Maybe it was a super nice Ranger boat. I don't know. Maybe it was something bigger than that, having a great family. Maybe it was something larger than that. Something that you had in your heart to do for people. And somewhere along the line, you're here because that dream got derailed. I mean, I would guess, I know all of you in here enough well enough to know that this is not your dream. So, you know what, when I grow up, I want to live in community with a bunch of other addicts. That sounds like super fun. Whoopee! You guys had something more that you hoped for. You have something that's like, you still probably be super hopeful. We got derailed because somewhere along the line, most likely, you lost your faith. And you started walking in this world of reality that says that doesn't really happen. That's just a bunch of hooey that these crazy people like me who actually believe these things, believe that when I pray, these things are going to happen. When I pray, things don't happen. I don't believe that God listens to me or hears me. See? All of the things that are unseen for us either have not happened or cannot be proven for certainty. So what happens is that faith, or living faith, fills in the gaps between the evidence of these things and what we hope for on these things. There's a gap in between them. You know, we want to have a successful career, we want to be a stockbroker, but the reality is I'm stuck in a house full of a bunch of other guys. This is the reality. That's the hope. Faith is fills in that gap. And faith is what drives us to try to push towards that. See, the people that I know, that I've either heard of in the Bible or experienced personally in my life, who do these crazy, weird, wild things, are people who at some point have to start taking these big leaps of faith to make them happen. They get desperate enough that faith becomes the driving force instead of logic, instead of certainty. In the dictionary, faith defines us as complete trust or confidence in something or someone. We've got to have faith in something else or someone else. And so faith at the heart of Christianity means that we give our lives and follow and believe in someone we cannot see, we cannot hear, cannot smell, cannot touch, cannot feel. But we follow that into this thing. Because faith defies logic. I mean, it seriously defies logic. And it takes something inside of us that says, I'm going to follow this thing that is crazy, that doesn't make any sense. And something inside me is gnawing at me, telling me to do this. Something's telling me to go here and spend my money on this. See, the Bible is one long story of faith. That's really what it is. It's a journey of faith, of people that started believing something. God came to this guy named Abraham and said, I'm going to make you a great nation. So he picked up his tent and started moving and walked across the country. Ultimately, that dream came true. But it took generations for that to happen. But Abraham had to make that first step and say, God, I believe that you're going to lead me and guide me wherever I go and whatever I do. In the Bible, these stories, there are some people who thrived at faith. There were some who were moderately good at it. And there were some who crashed and burned and failed miserably at faith. One of my favorite chapters is the book of Hebrews. How many of you have read the book of Hebrews? A few of you. You want to be encouraged in things, go to the book of Hebrews. The 11th chapter of the book of Hebrews, there's a list of what we call the heroes of faith. What? Hebrews chapter 11, the book of the heroes of faith. It's all about that. It tells you all the stories about people like Abraham and Noah and David and Samson and Saul. It gives them the things to do. But in the middle of this chapter, right in the middle of it, in verses 33 and 39, it tells us this about the people who we read about. So it's Hebrews chapter 11. I'm going to read 33 through 39. It says, it lists these people right in the middle of it. It says, these are the people who through faith conquered kingdoms, administered justice, and gained what was promised. There are people of faith who shut the mouths of lions, who quenched the fury of flames and escaped the edge of the sword, whose weakness was turned to strength and who became powerful in battle and routed foreign armies, women who received back their dead and were raised to life again. I bet that in here there are guys, some of you guys are going to get to that point, that you can conquer kingdoms. That you can gain what's promised. That you can be powerful in battle. But there's another part to this verses. It also says this. It says there were others who were tortured, refused to be released so that they might gain an even better resurrection. Some who faced jeers and floggings and even chains and imprisonment. They were put to death by stoning. They were sawed in two. They were killed by the sword. They went about in sheepskins and goatskins, destitute, persecuted, and mistreated. But here's the key phrase to all of this. Listen to this. All these things that these people did, it tells us is one line. It's one of the greatest lines in the Bible. It says, the world was not worthy of them. Because of the faith that they had. It doesn't sound very appealing, that last part. You've got the verse up there, does it? The last part of that, when they were destitute, I don't like the destitute part, because I like to have some money. They were persecuted and mistreated. But they walked this thing out in faith. And David believed the things that God told him. And he did these crazy, weird, wild things. He became one of the richest men of all time. It says the last part, it says they were commended for their faith, yet none had received the promise of God. Since God had planned something better for us, so that together with them, we could be made perfect. See, faith is an important thing. I'm telling you this right now. And all the things that you have and want to try to do and want to try to be if you come to Christ, simply having faith is one of the most important things that you can have and do. See, the thing that we've done in the church, I've pastored a church. I've full-time pastored this church for 21 years. I've been in the ministry for over 30. I made a lot of mistakes, particularly early on when I was young. When I was in my 30s, 20s, 30s, 40s, I made a lot of mistakes. A lot of things the church has done to people, why people don't like going to church, is because it's often becomes a list of things you're supposed to do. If you're this way, if you dress this way, if you act this way, if you do these things, if you teach Sunday school and you go out and evangelize and they give you this list of do's, if you do all this stuff, you're a good Christian. See? But in the end of all these things, those things that can be important, being moral, teaching the kids to be right, all those kind of things, they can all be good things to do. But in the end of it, there's one thing that Jesus really wants. And it tells us that. List this in Luke 18:6 and 8. The book of Luke and the Gospel, one of the first 4 books of the New Testament. It says, and the Lord says, listen to what what the unjust judge says. I'm going to give you some context. I'm right in the middle of a story here that Jesus is telling his disciples. It's about this lady, probably in her 70s, 80s, I don't know, he kind of doesn't really specify. But she has an issue. There's some injustice that she's suffering. And she wants this injustice cleared up. And so she keeps going to the judge. This judge, when she stands before the judge, she says, Judge, I want justice. He says, all right, whatever case we want. I want justice. I want justice. And he keeps pestering, she's pestering and pestering and pestering and bugging him and bugging him and bugging him that she wants justice. And finally, the judge relents because he's tired of listening to her. And he gives her the justice that she wants. So he's in the middle of this story about how important this kind of stuff is. Justice, and just like justice is today, the inequality of the races, this needs to be fixed. This is unjust. And Jesus cares about this stuff. But listen to this, the last half of this. He says, will not God bring about justice for those who cry out to him day and night? Will he keep pushing them off? I tell you, he will see that they get justice. However, now one word in there, however, telling you that Jesus cares about these things. He cares about what's going on in the world right now. All the social things that are going on, Jesus cares about them. But there's a word here that says, however, when the Son of Man comes, when he walks into this room, Amen. When he comes back to the earth, when he comes into your bedroom, when he walks into your family's house, it says, however, when the Son of Man comes, will he find faith? That tells me that he cares about justice, but he cares more about faith. Will he find faith? Will you have that faith? Jesus cares about this. He cares about people who have done these great things through faith. They do them because they have this faith. They've made this decision to follow God no matter where he leads. And that makes all the difference. See, faith is a thing of, I'm going to follow no matter what it looks like. See what I'm saying? Faith is the opposite of certainty. It's easy to follow God if you know what he's going to take you and knows where you're going to go. But if he takes you these crazy things and does this weird stuff, sometimes it's hard to say, well, I don't have to go there. You know, there's an old joke about church people that they always tell you, never say never when it comes to God. Because that's what he's going to do. You know what I mean? You always laugh and say, I'm never going to go to Indonesia. I'll never go there. I'll never go to the inner city of Chicago. I would never go there. And then that's where you end up God says, I'm sending you. You must say, okay, you see how much faith you got if you're a Christian. They put us in these kind of crazy situations. This is all about the path that we're willing to take. And the problem is that often that path that God chooses for us has a high degree of uncertainty when it comes to the destination. It sometimes has a high degree of risk. And faith is that gap that we step into, so I'm going to be willing to take that step and follow that call or that need or that dream. I've heard people say, if you're praying for something that you can do yourself, you're not praying big enough prayers. And what's the point? If you can do it yourself, with the money you got in your pocket, with the talent you have in your side of you, that's not really faith. So pray for something big, dream for something big. God can see you. Most of this life is filled with uncertainty. You know, most of the Bible, the last half of the Bible, was written by a guy named Paul, who was an apostle that was appointed by God, wasn't even a disciple following Jesus. But he wrote the last 2/3 of the Bible. When he got to the end of his life, he wrote to his friend Timothy, he said this, he said, I fought the good fight, I've run the race, and now there is set before me a crown of righteousness. So he compares this life like a running a race. It's an analogy of running a race. He also kind of wrote in the book of Hebrews, he said, let us throw everything that hinders us and the sin that entangles us, and let us run with perseverance the race marked before us. So this race of faith is put up ahead of us. See? Following God's not a destination. I'll tell you this right now. I know how many of you spent your life in church and you've heard this. That, we talk a lot about salvation and getting people to come to Jesus. And a lot of times people think that, well, if become a Christian, I get saved and I can go to heaven. Right? I don't know, have you heard that message ever? That's a shortcoming of who Jesus God really is. I mean, that's a solid reason, but there's more to it than that. There's more to this thing where you just say this prayer, get a golden ticket, and say, now I can get into heaven, now I'm good. There's a lot more to this. There's this life. It's not a destination. It's a journey. There's a lot of excitement, a lot of enthusiasm in the journey, along the journey. We can learn to do. We don't know the end of these things, but we know that in the struggle we can still have these great lives of reward. Now remember that Paul talks about this race. I want to press you with just a couple things before I close here. I got just a couple more minutes I want to go with. Paul writes and says, do you not know that in a race all runners run, but only one gets the prize? Any runners in here? You guys like, anybody that runs marathons or anything like that? A lot of those. I got a friend, his name is Mark. He's run over 425 marathons, I think. Something like that. He's run a marathon in all 7 continents. He's run 7 marathons in 7 days. I don't know. He's run a lot of ultra marathons, like 50 miles plus. I mean, this guy lives to do this. He always tells me, he says, I run so that I don't get fat. He said, if I stopped running, I gain weight. But it's no surprise, because I went with him on a trip one time. We went to Grand Marais. He ordered a medium spinach pizza, and he ate a quart of ice cream. That's a lot of food. A whole pizza and a whole quart of ice cream in one sitting. And he lives to run. He runs all the time. He's flying everywhere. He runs Pikes Peak. He runs, goes out to Hawaii and he runs these marathons in Europe, everywhere. He lives for this. See? For him, that's his journey. It says, run the race. This is what Paul's telling us. Like marathons, run the race in such a way to get the prize. Everyone who competes in the game goes into strict training. They do it to get the crown that will not last. But think about it. We do it for a crown that will last forever. And then in Philippians, he writes this last sentence. But one thing that I do, he says, forgetting what is behind and straining towards what is ahead, I press on towards the goal to win the prize for which God has called me heavenward. So we see a couple of keys to faith here. Okay? So stick with me just 5 more minutes. I'm going to make an application to this. Here's the thing. Faith. Faith and living this life of faith. Here's a couple keys for you. First thing Paul tells us is to train hard. You can't just jump into a marathon, the day of the marathon, and think you're going to win the marathon. It doesn't happen that way. You got to train. If you want to live this life of faith, you got to train for it. You've got to learn, you've got to work hard, you've got to seek advice. You've got to hang around people of faith. Learn from them. That's what runners do. They hang around other runners and, hey, what kind of shoes you like? I bought these kind of shoes and I hate them. Do this. Or they'll say, yeah, I train, I do this, I run 5 miles, I do this, I do intervals, and I do. I mean, if you're working out, you're hanging out with other people, you're watching their workouts, it's the same thing with faith. If you want your faith to go, you got to hang around with people who live lives of faith. The second thing he tells us is to forget what lies behind. Guys, this is a big deal. Forget what lies behind. You guys are at this point in your life where you've had some failures. That's why you're here. Right? You failed in some form. But forget about that. He says to quit looking back. Quit letting that define who you are. See, just because you failed, that's not who you are. It's a momentary thing in your life that happened, but you can pick yourself up and you can move on from that. See? If you're running a race, you can't keep looking back when you're running. You've got to look straight ahead and look for the finish line. Keep your eyes forward. See? Then it tells us to strain towards what is ahead. When you get close to the finish line, runners strain and stretch to the finish line. It's hard work to press ahead. But strain ahead. There are great things ahead. If you guys can grab a hold of these things, if you grab a hold of why you're here and what's being taught to you, there are great things that are going to happen to you. I can promise you that. It tells us to press on. He says, don't give up when the going gets hard. Persevere and fight for what's ahead. If you have kids, fight for those kids you got. Get this cleaned up so you can get back into your kids' lives. It's worth it. You know, the Olympic marathon is the oldest event of the Olympic Games. It's what they were founded on. It's always the last event that they run. The runners leave the stadium and they head out into the unknown. They don't know where the course is. They just got to follow. That's like faith. They just follow the markings. Okay, I got to turn here, down, this. They follow these markings into the unknown. They travel this course, and for 26 miles they follow that course no matter what's ahead. They can't take a shortcut. You can't cut through this field and come back on the course down here. You're going to get disqualified. They've got to have the faith that they laid out the course the right way. The only choice that they have is to start and follow the course. That's what faith is. We start something and we follow unknowingly. Sometimes their course is up and down hills, it's around curves. It can be full of risks. But 26 miles later, those who persevere, those who keep that faith, re-enter the stadium the same way they left it. And they enter the stadium, and it's a stadium full of people, and the crowd roars when they come in and they finish across the finish line. See? But ultimately, fit what happens between the start and the finish determines where they place. That's where you guys are at now. You're in that place between the start and the finish. And you've got to have the faith to keep going the course that is laying ahead of you. See? God has great things ahead of you. Don't give up. There's hope. Have faith. I want to quote this verse for you because I want you to hear this. I want you to jump into this because it's important. But Jeremiah 29:11 says, "For I know the plans I have for you," says God. He's got plans for you. You know that? God has plans for you guys. These are plans that are good and not for disaster. To give you a future and a hope. In those days when you pray, I will listen. And look for me wholeheartedly. You will find me. That's what Nick was trying to express to you earlier. There's hope. You guys want to stand up with me? I'm just going to pray. You want to put that prayer on? Be up there and pray with you a bit. I'm going to let you go here in just a second. Lord, we just pray you would help us all to live this life of faith, to grab a hold of this verb of faith, and understand that faith is that absence of being certain of what's going on, but being willing to grab a hold of the uncertainty, to live this life of uncertainty at times. I pray, Lord God, that you could bring faith that's strong and powerful to these guys today. That they would know that you have plans of good and plans of hope for them. And that they would be willing to grab a hold of that life of faith because you have this plan for them that's good and purposeful for them. Lord, we just pray the rest of this day would be filled with hope in this place. That this house here would be filled with your presence so powerfully. There would be hope and faith and joy and peace here. These guys have experienced the mighty, miraculous presence of you today. We just thank you for this time together and pray your blessing on us now in Jesus' name. Amen. Amen.